At this juncture, allow me to introduce to you our brilliant keynote speaker. He is an assistant professor of bilingual and ESL education in the Department of Language Literacy and Special Populations at University of Texas Permian Basin. He received his PhD in ESL technology and teacher education from Texas A&M University. His areas of research interest are educational equity for English language learners and homebound students, TESOL, robot assistant learning, and bilingual education. Dr. Dabudi has received numerous awards, grants, and scholarships, including Texas Education Public Grant, CEHD Strategic Research Fellowship, CEHD Dean's Awards, and CEHD Research Grant from Texas A&M University. Professional Development Scholarship Award from TESOL International Association, and Educational Technology Intersection Award from Mid-TESOL. Dr. Dabudi has delivered keynote speeches in the USA, Armenia, Iran, Mexico, and Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, virtual applause to Dr. Army Dabudi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Doc, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really honored. It is such a great opportunity for me to present my research and also get in touch with not only teachers, but also some of the policymakers and authorities within the Department of Education in the Philippines. And also, I know that we have participants from all around the world. So this is gonna be a very interesting event. Rena, I usually double check with moderators whenever I want to present something regarding the time and everything, because I love to talk, but I know you may not have enough time for this presentation. I was told that I have about 30 to 45 minutes. Is that still what we have on the agenda? I just want to make sure.
Yes, Doc.
Would you say that again?
Yes, Doc, you may do so.
Okay, so between 30 to 45 minutes. So let me begin by thanking some of the most important people who are behind this event. And I really, really appreciate their efforts and their support for global education. I would like to thank Secretary Leonor Magtolis Priopes, and also Director Margarita Balestros. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly, but I'm just doing my best. I would like to thank them because of the policies that they have within the Department of Education and their passion and their interest in having mutual collaborations with the scholars from all around the world. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Shahbaz Khan, the Director of UNESCO in Jakarta. Also, Congressman John Reynold Tianco. It's an honor for me to be here, and I heard his vision actually, and his ideas about global education and the future, of education, both in the Philippines and around the world. So those words were really inspiring. Thank you so much, Congressman. I would also like to thank KPTEP President Danilo Osorio, as well as Dr. Alejandro Ibanez, the school division superintendent, and also Mr. John Reynold Tianco, again, the representative of the Lone District of Navotas. I would also like to thank the moderators, Rena and Marco, and everyone who I know that they've done a lot of amazing job behind the scenes. So thank you so much for having me. So I would like to share my screen now and show you my PowerPoint. So I would appreciate it if the moderators let me know if you can see my screen. Do you see the screen now, Lena?
Yes, Doc, we can see it now.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about diversity, inclusion, and global education in the new normal classroom. Obviously, when we talk about new normal classroom, the focus of attention is on education during the pandemic. And I hate to say this, but the pandemic is not over yet. So we should we should still try to focus on how we can improve education in this crisis, I would say. Also, we need to have plans for post-COVID era, which hopefully it will arrive sooner or later. So the new normal classroom basically means online and distance education during the pandemic, and hopefully we can discuss what we're going to do after the pandemic. So I know that the theme of this conference is global education, and we have global educators in our audience, the participants we have from all around the world. So it's not a bad idea to quickly review what we really mean by global education. So some of the most important factors when it comes to global education are international awareness, appreciation of cultural diversity, proficiency in world languages, and competitive skills such as high-level thinking skills that enhance creativity. So each of these elements are really crucial when we are dealing with high-quality education in a globalized world. The first one, international awareness. So it goes without saying that without being able to know one another, to know each other's culture, we wouldn't be able to communicate effectively. And that brings us to the second important element, which is the appreciation of cultural diversity. And when we talk about cultural diversity, I would like to mention that we are not necessarily focusing on having international people. Sometimes we have cultural diversity within one region, let's say in the Philippines. So I wouldn't be surprised if you tell me that you have like several different cultural ethnic groups within the Philippines and you have those students in the same classroom. So that is also cultural diversity, because most of the time when it comes to cultural diversity, people think that we are talking about only about international scholars and students, but that is not the case. The third one is proficiency in world languages. This is very important. If we have educators who are interested in mutual collaborations with international scholars to learn more about global education and collaboration, but they are not proficient in a foreign language, so it makes it harder for them to communicate. So that brings us to the discussion on the importance of learning English for teachers in a globalized world. And then we have competitive skills, such as high-level thinking skills that enhance creativity. How many teachers within the public school system that we have in our countries focus on teaching kids to develop critical skills and critical thinking? So it's very important. Unfortunately, in some parts of the world, teachers try to, train and educate kids in a way that they would listen to them. They become yes men, and whatever the teacher says, they approve. That's not a good model of education. For a bright future, we need to have kids who can question us, who can question not only the adults, but also the world and the system that we are controlling and living in this world, because it is through asking questions, discussion, debates, even with kids, that we can all grow and have a better future. So definitely teachers need to promote creativity and critical thinking in their classrooms. And that's one of the most crucial elements of global education. And then we have diversity and online education. So I would like to discuss this a little bit in detail, what I mean by online education. I know that scholars in different parts of the world, they have defined online education, distance education, remote education differently, but I use online education to refer to synchronous, asynchronous, and high flex classes. Classes which are we use online platforms to perform our daily tasks in those classrooms. So they can be they can be like face-to-face classes, but in a virtual setting. They can be classes in which the teacher only uploads the material and students would go do the assignments and everything. There's no face-to-face interaction between them. So I know that sounds like remote education, but I would like to refer to all of them as online education and use this term as an umbrella term, so that we can all kind of relate to this discussion, because now we have lots of participants here, and I'm not sure if everyone has, let's say, a synchronous online class or a asynchronous or a high flex class. So let's use that term online education to refer to non face-to-face classes that we all have during the pandemic. So how can we create diversity? Because diversity is one of the core elements of global education. But scholars have been talking about this, like how we can use different strategies to increase diversity in classroom. But now we are living in a different world. It's online education. So how can we increase and improve diversity and inclusiveness within our online education? One of the important things that we can do is to create an environment in which teachers and students can understand each other better. So we refer to this usually as interpretation awareness, meaning that teachers and students, when they are communicating, whether it is verbally or non-verbally, they can understand each other. Unfortunately, when it comes to online education, most of our communication is non-verbal, and that can create confusion, and that at times, it can create misunderstandings as well. So it's very important to communicate in a way that we can understand each other. We as educators and children, our students, we can understand each other and interpret what we really mean. Even using, let's say, emojis or pictures or certain words can at times create misunderstandings. So it's the job of a teacher in a globalized world to pay attention to the way that he or she is communicating with those students. And it's always a good idea to clarify some of the methods or some of the strategies that she will be using for communication with your students, like at the beginning of the semester. So I know that some teachers, when they ask a student to email them or send them a message on a platform or something, when they get that, they usually use these automatic whatever generated responses to get back to the students. In some cultures, that's not appropriate. So you have to address people like individually. So it is important to communicate. We don't have a good or bad model. What is important is we have to clarify and explain what we mean by all these different modes of communication, so that kids and our students would feel that the way that we are communicating with them is just similar to face-to-face, just a different mode or different platform that we are using. The second important element is course design. As educators, we all know material development and course design, they are not easy tasks, especially when it comes to online education. Now we're going to add the element of diversity because we are focusing on global education, so it can be even more challenging. So what we can do, one of the things that I always recommend teachers when I'm trying to train pre-service teachers here in the US is to tell them how important it is and how useful it is to get in touch with other teachers. Sometimes teachers try to only refer to their supervisors or advisors or teacher trainers, but they are not accessible all the time. So that's where the importance of having communities of practice or knowledge communities, come into attention. What is a knowledge community? What is a community of practice? Teachers these days can create like online chat groups or whatever we want to call them, platforms, or even they can be discussion forums, and we can use all of them almost for free these days. And that's a good thing. We just need to have internet connection so they can get in touch with one another and start collaborating, because you would be surprised if I tell you how many times, based on my own experience, I needed something and I had a question and I didn't know what to do with a certain student or with one assignment, and other teachers who I thought they had similar knowledge to me and probably the same background, they knew the answer. So it's always good to create those knowledge communities and communities of practice. Because as a scholar, as a researcher, I know how important it is to have good policies in a country or in a university, school, whatever. So I know the importance of having like authorities or people who are in charge to create good policies. However, at the same time, I usually like the bottom-up approach, as I call it. So I would like to see teachers and students and parents who would also create communities in which they can also improve education. The third element, which I think is important, is acknowledging and understanding cultural differences. So it is very important. I know that in some countries, in some cultures, for some people, just being different has a negative connotation, but being different is not bad. It just means that you're different or the student is different. So we should be aware that these differences actually is making the world a better place for us. Just imagine if we all had the same kind of attitude towards issues or the same opinions or whatever. So understanding different cultures and respecting and acknowledging these cultural differences is also very important. And that's one of the most important elements when it comes to diversity and online education. Then we have inclusive online education, which is also very important. Are we creating assignments that are suitable for every student in our class, regardless of their cultural background or regardless of their disability? So there are some principles that I thought I should share with you, and they are very useful principles. The first one is establishing and supporting a class climate that fosters belonging for all the students. The number one important factor when it comes to motivation for students to try to learn and to succeed is when they feel that they are really, really belonging to a certain class. So if the teacher intentionally or unintentionally is giving them a feeling that they do not belong here, or probably they cannot be as successful as the other students because they are different, because of a disability, cultural difference, language barrier, or whatever. So that's gonna negatively affect the achievement of that student, the academic achievement. So it's always very important to establish and support a class climate that is welcoming for everyone. And second is we have to set explicit student expectations. Sometimes as teachers, as educators, so this is for us, we are in a conference, we can criticize ourselves, and that's a good thing. So sometimes we as educators, we don't even know what we want from our students. And at the end of the class or the semester, we are worried and we are disappointed and we nag about the students, oh, they are not trying well, they're lazy students, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, when we reflect upon our own experience and our own reflections and expectations, we figure out that we didn't have clear expectations. So it's very important, the beginning of the semester, the term, whatever terminology you use in your country, to have clear expectations and explain that to your students. So I would love to see when a teacher creates an assignment or an activity, I would love to see the expected outcomes, because that shows the teacher knows what he or she is doing, and second, the students would know what they are expected to learn after doing that task or activity. Then we have the third principle, which is we have to select course content that recognizes diversity and acknowledges barriers to inclusion. So this is also very important. At times, we know the cultural differences that we have in our classroom. We know the students and we know their needs and everything. However, and we respect that, that's fine. However, the content and the materials that we are using, they are not just reflecting our intention to be more inclusive. So it's very important to choose materials that are suitable for everyone. And then number 4 is we need to design course elements for accessibility. And this is one of my favorite areas, and actually it's one of my areas of research interest, the concept of access to education. So it's very important, especially during the pandemic. And I'm going to talk about the Philippines in a few minutes and some of the challenges that you have while teaching, online. But so let's just remember, sometimes kids, they do not have access to the materials or to resources or to even devices in order to perform a task. So we need to be flexible. I'm going to give you one example. So if you are creating an assignment in which the student is expected to record a video, what happens if that student doesn't have a good camera or even a cell phone, or there's something wrong and he or she cannot record a video? So we should be kind of flexible when it comes to that. I personally, what I do, especially during the pandemic, I usually try to give them 3 different modes, 3 different ways that they can submit the assignment. If it is a reflection assignment, so I'm not talking about, for example, an essay or a critical paper. No, if you want them to reflect upon something, I usually give them 3 different options. They can either record videos, and submit a video, they can record audio, or even they can write. So obviously it helps them to choose the one that works for them. And at the end of the day, they are doing the assignment or the activity. So what is important is I want to see the reflection. If it is in video, audio, or on paper, it doesn't matter, especially during the pandemic. And also, let me tell you something else. We all know that we have different types of learners in our classroom. Some are visual learners, some are auditory learners, and some, they don't prefer video and audio. They are just traditional and they would like to write, and there's nothing wrong with that. So giving them all these different options is amazing. And then number 5, reflect on one's beliefs about teaching online to maximize self-awareness and commitment to inclusion. It's very important. We have goals, we have activities, we try to take inclusive education in a globalized world into account. But at the end of the day, we need to reflect upon our own experience. And you remember what I said about those communities of practice or knowledge communities? That would be great if we can also reflect upon peers and get some feedback from them as well, so that we can modify and revise and make our classes better for future. Remember, we know teaching is hard. We know teaching is challenging, but we have decided to be in this field.
Joining
And the reason that we have decided to be in this
forum,
field
international forum, kaya
and the reason that we have decided to be in this field is actually because we know how rewarding this field is. So it is very important. So next slide, some of the challenges of online education in the Philippines. I know we have scholars and colleagues from all around the world, so I'm gonna build upon the challenges that teachers have in the Philippines to just make a case about the strategies that I'm gonna recommend for you to use in your classrooms. And this is based on a study published in 2020 by Rodos and Cahape. So some of the challenges that they reported that educators in the Philippines have during the pandemic with online education is unstable internet connectivity, inadequate learning resources, electric power interruptions, vague learning contents, overloaded lesson activities, limited teacher scaffolds, and poor peer communication and conflict with home responsibilities, poor learning environment, financial related problems, and physical health issues and like mental health issues that some people have. So this is very interesting. When I was invited to do this keynote speech, so I started reading more and doing research about the Philippines and the education system and everything. And what I learned is that the challenges that educators and students have during the pandemic with online education is very similar to the ones that we all have in different parts of the world. So you may be surprised if I tell you that some of these, I would say most of these challenges, which are listed here based on that study, they exist in the US. It's just the scope is different, So the strategies that I'm gonna actually introduce would be helpful to almost any educator in any country in the world, because we are sharing all these challenges. So let's look at a table, and I would like to read some of the narratives of the challenges of these students. For example, for unstable internet connectivity, one said, "I live in a remote area." So that's very important. So when I tell you that we need to be inclusive, we need to be flexible, it's because of these, the type of data that we have here and the facts and everything. Because we know that some people live in remote areas and they do not have access to internet connection, and that happens even in the US. So I had one student in Texas who lives in a remote area, and she didn't have access to the internet during the pandemic. So it is a global issue. Or look at, for example, inadequate learning resources. Someone said, "I would need laptop and printer to study and really accomplish my requirements well." So he or she knows what is expected, and how he or she can be successful. However, the problem is that this student doesn't have the technology and the devices that that he needs. So it's very important to take into account all these challenges. So to look at just a couple of more examples, because not everyone is about, not every example here is about the challenges with devices or lack of, infrastructure. We have very interesting quotes as well. For example, poor peer communication. I also have difficulty with the poor cooperation of others in the group activities. Or another one, poor learning environment, there is no proper space for learning at home. Or even mental health, thinking about the difficult lessons and all these challenges, I'm reading just one of the code, made someone sick. So we have to take all these different challenges into account. And I'm gonna be fair. As teachers, you're also dealing with these challenges. But for the sake of understanding our students, that's a good thing, because I guess we are all in the same boat, so we can understand one another. But what can educators do in the Philippines, for example? So for some of these challenges, I would just recommend you to be flexible. Unstable internet connectivity, poor learning environment, electric power interruptions, conflict with home responsibility. So you need to be flexible. And this is not just about the Philippines, as I said. It happens all around the world. So you need to be flexible. Sometimes we know the problem, we know what kind of solution we need, but the issue is we cannot solve the issue instantly, or it is beyond our abilities, So what can we do as educators? We have to be flexible with the deadline, flexible with the mode of, assignment submission, like what I was talking about, video, audio, reading, and flexible with even the type of assignment. So it's not a bad idea to individualize one assignment for a student, because she cannot do it because of, the issues or the challenges which are out of her control. What about overloaded lesson activities? You need to be realistic. During the pandemic, students have lots of things to do. You also have lots of things to do. So you don't need to give them too many assignments. Some of the most successful education system in the world, just look at Finland as an example. They don't give too many assignments to students. So even with 1 or 2 assignments, if they are designed in a good way, you can get the same result or even better result than, let's say, 10 assignments that you usually use in your classes. So that's very important. You need to be realistic. Then we have financial related problems. What can you do as a teacher? You can communicate with them. So be understanding. So it is very important to let them know that you understand their challenges. You are a teacher, you are not responsible for solving all these issues, but at least you can communicate with them and you can assure them that things can get better. And then we have inadequate learning resources, So this is a very interesting one. And I hope if you are going to get at least one thing out of this presentation, I hope it's going to be this one. Let's put it this way. I just disagree. If a teacher in 2021 tells me that she doesn't have enough resources or inadequate learning resources, with one caveat, if you have a laptop or a computer and internet connection, I think you cannot say that you do not have enough learning resources, even teachers. But now I'm focusing on, even students, but now I'm focusing on teachers. For example, I got some feedback from teachers in the Philippines and other Asian countries, and they say that, okay, we do not have resources for lesson plans or for activities. No, you do. The issue is you're not looking for that. And when I say you do, I mean you are a globalized citizen. So you have access to this world of education using the internet. I just wrote some examples here for you. If you go to a website called, it's an American website, but it is free. You go to Cyber School Bus website. You can find tons of learning resources for teachers and for students. So you can have several different types of lesson plans. If that's not what you're looking for, and you want, for example, to focus on, let's say, just language learning, I provided one example. You can go to TESOL International Association. The website is TESOL
and you go to the resource center, you can find tons of lesson plan, activities, and several different tools that you can use in your classes. So it's not about not having enough learning resources. It's about not knowing them. And that's where the role of politicians and decision makers is important. So if a country wants to succeed and start having, a kind of a plan to a more successful education, to provide more quality education for students, you should have international collaboration with international scholars. So I don't know how many of you knew about these two websites, and we have hundreds of them. So they are just examples. I would like to ask Rena and the other moderators, Marco probably later, to just do a poll and see if I would like to see how many teachers were familiar with these websites, for example. So if your country starts mutual collaboration with international, with scholars, American scholars, researchers, we can come and train teachers. We can start this kind of mutual collaboration so that we can all grow together and we can all learn together. But at the same time, it's very important to know that there are very resources that unfortunately, teachers in other countries are not familiar with. So let's go to a couple of more examples. For vague learning contents, you can ask students to help you. This is very important. Sometimes teachers, they underestimate the role of the students and even parents in education. I would like to see some parts of learning happening outside the classroom. So it's always good to involve the students. If you want to create learning, activities or contents, even lesson plans and assignments, I usually ask my students to help me with the assignments. I say, okay, these are the assignments that I have for you, but I would like to get feedback. At times they change 2 or 3 of them. Totally fine with me, because if the assignments that they are suggesting, the goal is similar to what I had in mind, it's just a different type of assignment. So why not? We should be flexible, and we should use our students, because guess what? When they are playing a role in creating the lesson plans and the contents, they are more interested and motivated to learn and to participate in class discussions. And then we have the issue of, limited teacher collaboration or communication. The authors in that paper refer to that as scaffolding and everything. So that can be done through several different ways. But one of the things that I know, unfortunately, is common among teachers is that you don't have office hours. I know it is more common in academia, but it would be great if you're doing especially asynchronous class, to be available for 1 hour or 2 hours per week, depending on the number of classes that you have, so that the students can get in touch with you, can communicate with you, so that they can ask their questions, they can share their ideas, and they can be sure that their voices can be heard. And then we have poor peer communication. Definitely you need to provide clear guidelines, but also it's important to teach them and help them to learn how to communicate with you. That's also very important. And also regarding physical health and mental health, obviously the best way is to refer them to a specialist, but also provide some support. I don't know, as much as you can. So very similar to what Congressman John Reynolds Tianco was talking, I would like to talk about some important elements within the global education, and these are factors affecting teachers in a globalized world, and I always refer to them as the most important characteristics that teachers should have. Teaching from the heart. We need caring teachers. We need compassionate, dedicated, and inspirational teachers. So you have to fall in love with this profession, because we know teaching all around the world, teachers are not paid well. It is demanding. It is challenging. In many countries, the social status is not okay. So we know this. But however, at the same time, we know how rewarding our profession is. So if we teach from our heart, if we dedicate ourselves to the field of education, I'm sure that the future, which is very bright, is ahead of us because we are training the next generation. So now I would like to also share my ideas about what's next for the Philippines and other countries regarding global education. I think you need to have more global collaboration and international partnership. You need to get in touch with the scholars and researchers in other countries, let's say in the US or any other country in the world, so that you can benefit from, you know, top-notch research findings and new technology and everything that, you know, teachers and researchers are using in developed countries. You also need to start collaborative research projects, because it is through research projects that we can not only identify the issues that you have within the education system, but also to solve and find some solutions for those problems. And obviously teacher exchange programs. I know many of you are familiar with this because of the conference and the association and everything, but also you need to have more international teacher trainers in the Philippines so that they can come, they can share their expertise and knowledge and their experience with the teachers. You know, for example, myself, I've been training teachers for many years. I've trained teachers from more than 35 different countries in the world. And I would love to come to any developing countries to start collaborating with the scholars and teachers and to get in touch with them and to help them and even to do research projects, because it is through mutual collaboration with international scholars that the field of education in general and the education system within a certain country can improve. So I would like to thank you again for the time, and I appreciate the invitation and everything. I have a few other slides about one of my research projects that I wanted to share with you, but I would like to check if we have time for that. So I would like Marco or Rina to let me know if we have like 4 or 5 more minutes.
Yes, Dr. Amin, you can do so.
Okay, thank you so much. So one of the research projects that I conducted a few years ago before the pandemic was a robot-assisted learning project. So actually, I'm not gonna focus on all the slides here, but I'm gonna very quickly talk about this because this is one of the areas that I think we can collaborate on, and it shows us the importance of having these international collaborations, because I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with this type of technology. You know, when we talk about robots and why we need robots, it's because we can promote educational access, we can create real life interactions in distance learning, and we can improve homeschooling and self-study. So we have several different types of robots. So we have toy-like robots, we have face or belly screen, we have humanoid robots, we have robotic head. I'm not going to talk about these different kinds. I'm just going to show the picture. So this is a toy-like robot. This is a face or belly screen robot. This is a humanoid robot. And this is a robotic head. So in a study in 2019, I used a different type of robot. And that robot is called a telepresence robot. So you can see this here in the picture. And I did this at Pennsylvania State University. What I did was I tried to virtually bring a homebound student to her classes. Who is a homebound student? A homebound student is a student who cannot go to school for several different reasons, including suffering from chronic illnesses. So in this case, this particular student was diagnosed with cancer, so she wasn't able to attend her classes. So what I did, I used a telepresence robot that you can see here in the picture, and it has a camera or an iPad on it, and I virtually brought her to her classes. So the first question that you may ask is, what is the difference between this telepresence robot and this Zoom, video conferencing tool that we are using? I'm going to go to this slide. I'm sure that all of you probably experienced Zoom fatigue during the pandemic. What scholars refer to as Zoom fatigue is basically the feeling of frustration that you're tired of all these online meetings and classes. And the main reason is there's only one angle. You look at the screen, everyone is in front of you. If you turn to your right or your left, you see no one. So it doesn't give you a 360 view, okay? So you feel tired and you do not feel present. So sense of presence is the biggest issue that we have with Zoom and other video conferencing tools. However, the one that I used in my study, it's a telepresence robot. Actually, I'm not going to talk about the detail of this. So I'm just introducing the concept. You can see the robot here in this picture as well. It gives the remote user the ability to move the robot. So let me explain. In that particular study, I put the robot in the classroom, and that a student who was diagnosed with cancer, and she was away at the hospital, or I don't know, in her bedroom, just recovering from chemotherapy and everything. She wasn't able to come to class, but she would have a video call through the robot. But the cool thing was she was able to use her cell phone. Any phone, you know, can work with this system. So she was able to use her cell phone to remotely control the robot, meaning that she would walk the robot, she would turn to her right or left, she was able to look up or look down. So it's very different with Zoom. She had that 360 view. So she felt really present in the class. And this technology solved that, sense of presence issue that we have in video conferencing tools. So I'm also going to show you a picture of, obviously for ethical reasons, I blurred the picture. And this was the student. You can see that she was home, and that's the picture. Actually, it was a video, but this is a screenshot of the communication that she had with the classmates. So, and everyone felt that she was present in the class because they were able to have that eye contact with her. And I'm going to give you one example. So in one example, which was very interesting, the teacher of the class went to the board to write something on the board. And then she followed the teacher with the robot because she was able to remotely control the robot and walk. She went to the whiteboard, took notes, and came back and virtually sit next to other students. So it was like, in this study, I refer to the student as Hope. That's not her real name. It's again for ethical reasons in research. So everyone at the end of this project told me that they thought they were part of a team. They were fighting Hope's cancer. So it not only solved that issue of sense of presence, it not only brought Hope to her classes virtually, and she was able to graduate on time. And Hope, fortunately, she also defeated cancer. But also it created a sense of community. You remember I was talking about communities of practice, knowledge community. It can also happen within the classroom because everyone thought that they were contributing to her education and also to her health. So I'm also, I would like to play this video so that you can see how the robot would work. This is from a news channel. They interviewed me, so it's very short. I'm gonna play it, but I think before that I need to stop sharing my screen, share my screen again, and share sound. So let's do this.
Schools are able to fully reopen.
Do you hear the sound of the video, Marco?
Yes, Dr. Ami,
Yeah.
we can hear.
Okay, good.
Schools are able to fully reopen. A student at Texas A&M is trying to fix the engagement issue students have in virtual learning environments. News 3's Andy Krause spoke to him to find out how he's using a robot to make it happen.
Virtual learning is something we're all very familiar with thanks to the pandemic. Unfortunately, it's a form of learning that most teachers say is less effective because it's harder to keep students engaged.
One of the biggest challenges that they have is that they get tired after a couple of hours. And that's because virtual classes in their current format, they're not similar to in-person ones because there's only one angle. We have to look straight, and we feel that everyone is in front of us rather than around us.
The goal of Amin Davuti's research is to improve distance education by integrating new technologies like telepresence robots.
I thought it would be a great idea to integrate telepresence robots into virtual classes just to make these virtual classes look more real and make students feel that they are really present.
It's a robot you've probably seen before. Students can control it through a phone app to move, swivel, and rotate, making a more interactive experience possible. Davuti envisions a single classroom having a few of these robots that would operate among other students who are physically present for learning.
We might say that that robot was an extension that helped that student embody the knowledge and the relationships that were going on in that class.
The research is moving and pushing the edges of educational learning, of access.
The next step is to do more studies with these robots actually in the classroom.
As far as I know, there have been only 5 research projects in which people use telepresence robots for educational purposes.
Andy Krause, News 3.
So basically, it was part of my dissertation. At that time, I was a student. And so it was a very successful project. So when I'm talking about, spreading the word about these new technologies, mutual collaboration, international collaboration within countries and universities, I'm actually talking about providing opportunities for teachers and, administrators in countries like the Philippines to also benefit from these, top-notch technologies that we are using here in the US. So thank you so much for the time. And I really enjoyed it. So I don't know if you're gonna give some time to the audience, Marco, to ask questions. So let's do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amin, for your insightful sharing on diversity, inclusion, and global education in the new classroom. There's a lot to take on that, Dr. Amin. No? One striking idea that I find in your presentation is number one is inclusive online education. It really resonates a lot here in the Philippines, though we are in the process of strengthening our ICT infrastructure network, but sooner we'll go into that direction. You also mentioned about the elements for accessibility in course design, and that is already being practiced, but you have validated that these practices in the country would really promote more, learning, improved learning outcomes in the country. I am so excited also with the research sharing that you have presented a while ago about the telepresence robot. I believe that a lot of science schools here in the Philippines would want to collaborate with you with that kind of research, because really that's very much aligned with the theme of this forum on partnership and innovations. And yes, there's a lot of meaningful ideas that we gained here.